Hello everyone and welcome back to a very special Backlot Banter movie review. My name is Tucker Hazel. I, of course, am joined by my co-host who wreaks havoc all around the globe, Tanner Dykstra. And today we're here to talk about a crazy action movie out of the Hindi side of Indian cinema that is Pathaan. The god himself, Shah Rukh Khan, is back in a crazy action movie. And we have seen it and we're very excited to talk to you about our thoughts on this film. But if you want to talk to us about Pathaan or any of the other movies we're reviewing, you can join our Discord. That link is going to be in the comments, not the description. We're not allowed to put links in the description yet. But while you're down there, in the comments or the description, subscribe to our channel, like this video, ring the bell because we will be reviewing plenty of other movies. There's lots coming, and you're never going to want to miss any of them. Trust me. I swear, trust me.
You should trust him, yeah.
We've seen Pathaan. This was both of our first exposures to Shah Rukh Khan. What did you think of this movie?
Tucker, limited as our experiences in Indian cinema have been, they've been good ones. We were blown out of the water, of course, by RRR. We liked Brahmastra Part 1 Shiva, and I think that Pathaan recaptures that RRR magic for me. I was waned a little bit by Brahmastra last year, but now I'm back on board. Shah Rukh Khan with the is a great leading action hero. We are in with zany, off-the-wall action that, we could only hope and dream for something like this out of an American blockbuster of this budget, of this scope. And it's just a grand old time. We were laughing, we were cheering, we were pumping our fists in the air in the theater. And we weren't the only ones. There were some laughs and some cheers behind us as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it recaptures what I love so much about RRR. And gives us, as well, a scope and series of films to explore that we weren't aware of when we went into this.
Yeah, there is a moment in this film that I will not spoil for members of the audience who are familiar with this extended universe. They might understand some connections a little better than we were going in, but even without the setup of the fact that there are 3 other films before this that take place in this universe, that didn't hinder our enjoyment at all because it's not centered around those other characters, centered around Shah Rukh Khan as Pathaan, his big return to films, but his first large action role, leading role, which is crazy because he is such a confident action actor and is so charming and is so suave and is so cool and doing all these stunts. It's really a lot of fun and it is working for them because I was doing a little research. I was going around the internet. I found out that this is the biggest opening weekend and biggest opening day for a Hindi film ever. So Pathaan is doing gigantic, and it's also the first Bollywood film to ever be shot using IMAX cameras. So this film is innovating, it is doing incredibly well at the box office, and it's doing quite solidly overseas as well. So I foresee this with Shah Rukh Khan, and now you and I being exposed to this universe, to these actors, to this director. This is now something we're going to be seeking out more of as we start watching more and more of these, and this is a great example of what Indian cinema is doing on this big budget action spectacle side that some American films attempt to do. I think this you can draw very direct parallels to the James Bond films, to the Mission Impossible movies, but those always try to be more grounded. And the fun of the action spectacle of Indian cinema is that they don't care as much about things being grounded. They can throw over to a musical number with our relatively serious action characters just doing a full-on dance. And they can just pull in things that don't make any sense physically. They can riff on classic tropes of action cinema and just have a lot of fun with it. And it all comes back to our cast of 3 core actors playing the core roles of the actor, the hero, the hero's love interest, who's also a hero, and the villain. They're all phenomenal in this movie.
They are all great. I do want to shout out to Shah Rukh Khan, of course, our leading man, our anchor through this globe-trotting spy adventure. And Tucker, as you enlightened me to, he's not typically Shah Rukh Khan is not an action lead. He's a romance lead, and he
has been for a long time.
Translates seamlessly into this genre. I wouldn't even, if I had to guess, I would this guy is probably a storied action star in India. But nay, that is not the case. But he has the physique for this. He has the charisma for this, and he can bring the intensity of when he's facing down against Jim, our nefarious villain of the film. he can bring that intensity of he is, he's going to stop this chaotic reign of Jim and, bring peace to the world and especially to the India, the country which he loves and respects and respects him.
Lots of patriotism in this film, which is interesting for people who've never been to India, who don't know anyone who lives in India. The patriotic side that we're so used to getting in some American films. I'd say it's less common now than it used to be, but it was kind of refreshing to see a patriotic perspective of another country, because I know it's stupid, but it just reminds us there are other people who are just as dedicated to their countries across the globe.
I think Jim even has a tattoo behind his ear that runs down his neck that says Patriot on it. They show that a couple times. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
The one thing I do want to say about Shah Rukh Khan is that his performance as our main character, Pathaan, started off a little bit, I was like, okay, is this kind of generic? It's kind of just fitting into tropes. But I think as the film goes on and you learn more about his backstory, all right, he's making the Riz face quite frequently. And he hit the softer and more humorous side of his personality comes out in multiple sequences. I'm like, okay, this is not only a incredible action hero guy, but he's a guy that I'd like to just sit down and have a drink with and talk to, because he seems like he could crack a couple jokes and pat his friends on the back and go out and have a good time, which is not something you get from the serious characters in Mission Impossible or James Bond. They'll have flirty moments, but they don't have a nervous side to them that sometimes Pathaan has, which I think is a really great way to humanize this godly character.
It really diffuses his whole suave action man persona in moments that I really enjoy, when Rubina is being very forward with him, or he's very clearly nervous because he loves her and he's stumbling over his words. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know when to put the moves on, if you catch my drift. They just serve themselves to be really fun and entertaining moments in the trenches of the film, and not the peaks of the action, high voltage action stuff.
Yeah. And I think that it is, again, as I said, those two other main characters of the movie, Deepika Padukone as Rubina and John Abraham as Jim, that make this a holy trinity of great action characters. It's because we don't only get a great action hero and a love interest who's kind of simple and doesn't do much, but Deepika Padukone is holding her own in these action sequences, and she's doing moves just as cool, and she's outdoing Pathaan in some sequences, and their dynamic is absolutely electric. From the first moment that they are introduced to one another, and they have this shootout behind pillars, and they're trying to talk to one another, get to know one another as they're being shot at by 20 guys, and I'm like, the dialogue is hitting, their performances are hitting, the action is hitting, and you're instantly glued into, I want these two to get along, have fun together, and eventually fall in love, because they're just so much fun together.
Yeah, Tucker, the scene you brought up there is a great example as to why all of these performances work and all these characters work, because it is that coastal Spain setting when Pathaan is tracking down Rubina, and he finds her, and he does his Riz face when he's looking at her from across the crowd of people, and she's doing her musical sexy dance, and he's ooh, yeah. And then he follows her through this cave, and she dives into a pool, and the camera slowly pans to reveal, who is it? Jim, just sitting there in the pool, giving him oh, I got you, buddy. You thought, but I got you pinned. And then Rubina does the whole action sequence around Pathaan. He's just kind of standing there handcuffed. He barely does anything, and it's her time to shine and beat those assholes up. And then right before that, when Jim leaves, he's got the short shorts for swimming and a leopard print robe on. He's walking to a helicopter. It's this is just emblematic of how cool everyone in this movie is and how it exudes coolness.
Yeah, it exudes coolness, but it's also kind of geeky. It's kind of nerdy. Yeah. It's kind of dumb in moments. But I think that the fact that it takes itself so seriously and this is the craziest people and they're the highest skilled, most dangerous people on the planet, but they have a goofy side and they're cracking jokes occasionally, and Jim is notorious for just slipping in a joke or a smile or a thumbs up in the middle of his I'm going to blow up the world speeches.
It's I'm going to destroy India. Thanks guys, have a nice day.
And I love that sense of humor
Yeah.
that the film has, and I think that no one does that better than John Abraham as Jim. His performance, he is such an intimidating presence, both physically and facially, and like the square draw and the punches that he's delivering are so top notch in terms of an action villain. But he also has this goofier side to him, which weird tangent to draw, but it kind of reminds me of Chris Evans in The Gray Man, who is an intimidating force, but he has a goofier side, and he's trying to land some jokes. But I think that John Abraham as Jim does that so much better here, because his dynamic with Pathaan, they're kind of on the same level of, they're both intimidating, they're both very skilled, they both have really interesting backstories, I think, as we'll get into a little bit with spoilers at the end. But that is all like super nuanced in these really, really strong performances.
Yeah, I mean, I also want to bring up Tucker. You mentioned how connections can be drawn between other American action franchises.
Yeah,
and it's just interesting to draw those connections and see how Pathaan one-ups them in this new film. Because you mentioned James Bond. We, of course, have our leading action spy guy working for his government who's just accurately gunning down waves and waves of baddies. You have Mission Possible with the globe-trotting nature. There's even like a really fun heist sequence in this that sort of...
it's a great heist sequence.
That sort of mirrors the Langley heist from the first Mission Impossible with them being like lowered into this vault and stuff like that. Oh, and even I was getting a lot of Captain America Winter Soldier vibes from that fight on top of the truck in Dubai towards the beginning. Especially because Jim has like a sort of pared down Captain America outfit on. Like, this is very... And he's fighting some guy that's got like shoulder length hair and stuff like that, who's back from the dead, as he assumes. And he's pulling helicopters. I'm like, this is very Captain America right now. Yeah. And I loved it. I loved all of it.
Yeah, I think that it pulls so many influences, but it still feels very distinct because as people who aren't very experienced with Indian action cinema, it does give enough of a not American flair that I'm like, okay, I've seen this, but I like what it's doing to subvert my expectations in these moments and still feel like it has a sense of fun even when shit is blowing up and people are getting shot and our main character is like getting beaten to a pulp, which happens quite often, which is another reason I think Pathaan is such a good character, is he is one of the most skilled action characters I've ever seen, but he also like will sometimes get punched, go, that hurt, and I'm like, okay, he's still a guy deep inside, which I think is nice.
Yeah. I want to bring up one other action sequence, one of the other big ones, I think, which is the train rescue. And is this a point where we can bring up the spoilery sort of cameo that's in this film? Okay. If you haven't seen it and you want to be surprised, maybe just skip ahead a minute or two. But the train sequence after Pathaan has been taken in by the Russian government, and he's on a train transport to a Russian prison, and there's a bunch of other prisoners there who are sent to kill him. And then who shows up but apparently another staple of Indian action cinema, Tiger. And that's just a great sequence in itself because you get a camaraderie between two guys who sort of fill the same niche but are different. In that you get, it's a glimpse into the history of this franchise, but also the history of action cinema in India, where you're like, oh, I feel the weight of this guy showing up and the meeting of these two characters and how they can joke about being the old guys in this profession because they've, at least the actor who plays Tiger has been in these sort of films since 2012. So he's going on a decade of doing this. And the experience is there, the weight of having this cameo is there, and the fun of it is all there. And that's more important, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. The other thing that I want to mention about this film is that I think it is really fun drawing on things like Mission Impossible or Fast and Furious, where it's just a globe-trotting adventure, and we get a variety of locations. You've got an action set piece in Russia, you've got an action set piece on a mountain, you've got an action set piece on a train, on a truck. Like, they span the gamut of, like, how
Dubai,
many places...
Africa, India...
Exactly, yeah. How many places and vehicles can we set our action... We also have... At the end, an action set piece in the sky, which is a lot of fun. And I think
like
that variety
Arctic,
absolutely keeps it...
Russia, I don't know. Whatever. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. But the variety definitely keeps it nicely spiced up. And you never know where or what kind of fight they're going to be having next.
Yes. I mean, I just absolutely loved every element of Pathaan. I think it goes a little long, and the structure of it can be confusing at times if we
Yes.
have to poke holes. But at the end of the day, the order of events are clear, and it keeps the energy going throughout. I
Yeah.
think that the time jumps can be confusing, but they're like, okay, now we're 3 years in the past, and we are learning about the origins of Joker, and now we're 2 years in the future, and Joker's established, and they're going on this mission, and all of these things are happening. And I think keeping that momentum of pace, that action, of time in these action films is what's important. You know,
Yeah.
I can, it will fade in my mind. Like, oh yeah, how many years was between these two events? It doesn't matter. What matters is Tiger and Pathaan on top of a train using miniguns to shoot down a helicopter that then crashes into the bridge that the train is on, and they have to run across the top of the train cars to save themselves at the end of the day. It's just a damn good time.
Yeah. Tanner, what would you give this film out of 10?
I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. 9.0.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it just slightly lower, but still really fantastic at an 8.8. I like Pathaan a lot. I think that being introduced to Shah Rukh Khan, sort of a reinvention at this moment, is like kind of perfect for us, as we're action cinema guys, and he filled that niche surprisingly incredibly well, and we're now going to be seeking out whatever projects he does next. And of course, we've now reviewed 3 films from India of this sort of scope and spectacle, and that's multiple directors, actors, franchises, and a whole nation's worth of cinema that we're now like actively seeking out, which is the best thing that I think any of these movies can do. RRR coming out and people now wanting to see Indian movies, Parasite coming out and being interested in Korean cinema. These films that cross over the international borders and grab us regardless of our disconnect from the culture is what movies need to do more of. And it's so nice to see a movie like this with an actor that is so incredibly famous but that we weren't familiar with come here. We were able to see it in a theater with a healthy sized crowd who were cheering, and it's doing incredibly well for an Indian film. So high praise all around.
High praise all around. Can't wait to see what Indian films we get next. I guess, talking to you right, I'm so happy to see more and more of them come to our theater in the middle of the country. It's just a weird turnaround, but a glad one. Happy to see it.
Absolutely. But if you're a fan of any of these films, much like our video, leave suggestions on what other big Indian movies that we should watch at some point in the future. Hopefully we will be reviewing more of those. And again, Discord, subscribe, like, bell,
do the things.